Hello there. Today's video is all about my first ever store treasure cup. I've been to a couple of locals now and I've performed pretty well, but I also recognize that they're not the most competitive of environments. A lot of people just go to take fun decks and try stuff out. This treasure cup was my first real taste of the competitive scene in One Piece, and I had a blast overall, but it wasn't without its hiccups. I was nervous, anxious, underprepared. I didn't really know what to expect, but luckily I met some people there, had some fun, and yeah, this is my experience. Jumping straight into it, I got there a little bit early, which ended up being a good move. I managed to get a couple of warm-up games in against some friends. One against Teach, one against Calgara. I myself was running Emu, which is the deck I was entering in the tournament, but what I didn't realize is that people bring multiple decks to these things. I won both the Calgara and Teach matchups, so I started to think, oh, maybe I can actually perform pretty well in this thing. And then they pulled out their second decks. This was the first surprise of the day. In other card games I've played, I've picked one deck and I've just locked in the entire time. I didn't even consider bringing another deck just to mess around with. And then something just clicked. It just made complete sense. Nothing has to be completely competitive all the time. So as a result, I've been building some fun decks now in the background, but more on that later. So while we were playing these warm-up games, I noticed a couple of people complaining in the background. The venue in which the event took place, that I won't be naming, bumped up the entry fee to £15, which was apparently some kind of controversy. The reasoning they gave was that the prize card for Sabo was like reaching a few £100s now in the eBay listings, so as a result they wanted people to pay more in order for a chance to win it. Since this was my first event, I didn't really have a horse in the race. I was just there to play. I just paid my £15, went on as normal. But the grumblings did make sense a bit later into the event. Right before round one, the staff started calling out the pairings for the matchups, and one name was missing, mine. I'd signed up the day before on the app, and I'd paid my £15 entry fee, so I was confused why I wasn't listed. So I went up to the staff to try and figure out what was going on. They were just as confused as I was, but to their credit, they were very nice about it, very apologetic, and they managed to get me into the event. They gave me the first round buy, which was bittersweet. Obviously, I'm going to take a buy. Very grateful for the opportunity. However, I did feel a bit guilty, I can't lie. I imagine the reason they just gave me the buy is because it probably would have been some kind of nightmare to do the pairings all over again and delay the event further. So yeah, they just gave me the buy, so free win. Downside to this is that I had to sit around and wait for round one to be finished. And in that time, when I've got nothing else to do, my anxiety builds and builds. I'm overthinking all the matchups. I've seen a few emus in the listings. I've seen some aces, you know, and I'm just planning for the worst. Then shortly into the round, I am very grateful for a friend that comes over and starts talking to me. Unfortunately for them, they've had a bit of a rough round one. They were piloting emu and they ran into a yellow Bonnie that just absolutely decimated them round one. They looked pretty beat up about it, and understandably, apparently they just didn't see the cards they needed. I tried to reassure them though, like sometimes you just don't see the cards and that's fine. Plus, Bonnie's a bit of a trigger-happy deck, right? So I think the luck was just on their side. Sometimes the deck just bricks, even with 49 cards. So we got to chatting, and this is why I learned why everyone was a bit on the fence about the pricing of this event. The prize card, the Sabo, which was worth about £400, was reserved for first place. The top four would win a Gold Dawn and a special art of the 5-cost Tashigi. Everyone else who was just participating would get one pack of PRB2 and 2 tournament packs. Doesn't quite add up, does it? And I can understand it now. So it definitely fueled the fire under me to try and get top 4. Round 2 rolls on and I finally have an opponent, but my opponent's half my size and he's playing buggy, but I would soon realize this opponent was not to be underestimated. The kid was cracked. He was so good. We both bricked early. I didn't see a 10 cost until like turn 6 or 7, and I'm not really sure what pieces they were looking for, but they kept complaining that they weren't seeing them. Luckily, I managed to stay pretty healthy, and by the time I finally saw my 10 cost, I was on 2 health, and I'd whittled them down to like 2 health as well. This is when things got stressful. Our game was the last one running, and it was just kind of a small store. Everyone started watching the match. My brain said nope. There was one turn that I'd established board, they had established board, and I was starting to go for life. I took their 2 remaining life, and then I attached all of my Dawn on one of my characters and went for game. However, my brain, too focused on the distractions of everyone around me, failed to realize that they had 2 blockers up still. The kid gave me a very confused look and was just like, I'll block? At that point, I had to laugh it off. I was just like, yep, okay, I'll pass. And I was like, yep, I'm gonna lose. However, because I hadn't seen my 10 costs early, when I've been taking searches, I had been collecting counter and the 4K event. So the kid the following turn pushed for game. They took my first life, I get 1K counter. They take my second life, I get 2K counter. I put on my best poker face. They go for game, I counter out. To the crowd, it might have looked like the biggest bluff ever and even a little bad-mannered, but honestly, I just completely misplayed. So I won round 2, but I did not deserve it. I said GG's and tried to pick up conversation afterwards, but my opponent was frustrated, and understandably so. But I kept things polite and I wished him good luck for his next round. Round 3 I faced a Zorro player. Now this guy I'd recognised from locals. Though I hadn't played him or spoken to him previously, I knew that he played quite a lot. I also know that Zorro is ever so slightly favoured going into Emu, but it's also the matchup that I've prepared for the most. Even so, I still took an unnecessary life early on. They attached 1 Don to leader and swung 6, which I was confused at and blocked. Then they attached the following 2 Don to leader, restood, and then swung again, and I lost the life. After that, it was a whirlwind of aggression. They saw 3 restand events over the course of the game, and they got me to 0 life before I even dropped the 10 cost. I think they knew that they had to kill me quickly, and they took that first scent of blood and went in for the kill. However, they overcommitted for the aggression and lacked protection. When I finally stabilized, I was able to kill a Dashigi and a Cavendish off of my Mars proc, dropped my 10 cost, and then walled up. By that point of the game, I'd searched so much that I'd cycled back around my deck and I'd managed to get my 4K counters again in hand, as well as a couple of 2Ks. I'd had to starve them for most of the game, so they were running low on resources, but for their final turn, they rested my War Curie and went for game. I managed to narrowly counter out, and then I pushed for game the following turn. This was easily my favourite match of the day, and honestly one of the best matches I've played in person. Starving still feels a bit alien to me, but I knew that I had to stick to the plan, and it ended up panning out. Yeah, another GG, 3-0, feeling good, on to round 4. Then came Lim. This is a matchup I haven't got a terrible amount of experience in, but I know that Lim is a difficult matchup for Emu. My opponent was also playing painfully slow at times. At one point, they took a full 5 seconds just to draw a card at the start of their turn. I got so bored I started counting. I'd like to give the benefit of the doubt, and I don't really know if this was intentional or not, but I have heard about this kind of thing circling in the more competitive scenes. So the slow play was starting to grind on me, and I was already pretty exhausted. From the length of the event, the social exhaustion, early pacing of the tournament, everything was tapping me out. So when they restood a non-Odyssey Sanji with a Mihawk, I completely missed it, which resulted in me taking a life in the mid-game. That being said, even if I caught it, I still don't think I would have won. I managed to keep board pressure pretty much consistently all game, and whilst I did see a few Mars? What's the plural? I was staying on top of board pressure and managed to get them pretty low. It was very close. If I had one more swing, I think I would have had it, but it is what it is. GG regardless. So I took my first loss here, and I thought I'd secured second place. Pretty happy with that, but the store had something else in mind. Again, because of the price of the Sabo online, the store management decided to do a top cut. So the Lim, who was the clear 4-0 winner of the tournament, would now have to go against third place, and me as second would have to go against fourth. If I won, and the Lim won, I'd have another shot at the Sabo. However, this yellow Bonnie player had other plans in store for me. Another kid to my surprise, and he was insane. Just to get my excuses in early, you know, I've had very little experience playing against Bonnie. I've played maybe 1 or 2 games against her on the sim, but to my limited understanding, they piloted the deck flawlessly. They managed to see all of their Liliths early, but then I made a huge blunder. I made the mistake of KOing the Basil Hawkins early. My logic here was that the longer Basil stays on board, the more they can pressure me and get caught out of my hand. So I'd be happy to just trash 1 life to get rid of it. What I failed to realize is that Bonnie truly comes online when I'm at 3 health. Swiftly after the Basil went down, they replaced with Kikunojo, and they just kept coming back. I managed to stabilize the board briefly. By the time that I dropped my second 10 cost, out of the 5 life that I'd taken from them, they'd hit 4 triggers. The board pressure was insane. And then after I used 10 cost ability to flood the board with old geezers, I made a huge blunder again, and I swung with my Nuzjuro. I took the final life, which they'd gotten back through some other character ability, and it hit another trigger. Blaze Slice. The Blaze Slice rested my War Curie. They had 4 bodies on board. I had enough counter for what was on board currently, but I didn't factor in the rest. I just conceded on the spot. You can't even get mad at triggers like that. It was so good. But yeah, GG's to my opponent. They played incredibly well. So whilst the Bandai app might say that I came second, technically I came third. As a result, I did get the Tashigi promo as well as the Gold Dawn. No Sabo, sadly. However, I almost didn't go to this event. Social anxiety was kicking my ass beforehand. But I went, I played, I got top 4. Sure, losing the Sabo sucks, but beating anxiety, that's a true victory for me. What I learned from the event is that I need far more practice in person. I was doing so many misplays. I almost forgot to put out my life at one point. So I will be attending more locals, and I'm building fun decks now. One of which is Bonnie. I thought it was so fun just to lose against that I had to build it myself. I realized also that I have like 94% of the deck, so get a couple of cards, we'll take it to local, we'll see how it goes. And that's it. That was my experience, my first ever store treasure cup. If you've watched this far, first of all, thank you for sticking around. If you've enjoyed this video, drop a like and consider subscribing for more One Piece content. And let me know in the comments, did you participate in any events? If so, what deck did you run and how did you place? Once again, thank you so much for watching. Till next time, peace.